If you clicked on this video, you want to be in the know of what makes random teams in your league make the playoffs and dominate in them. Lucky for you, I have all of these statistics that every single one of the winning playoff teams utilize to bring home the chip. So if you guys find this video helpful in any way, make sure to be subscribed if you're not already so you don't miss any more of these videos. It takes 2 seconds. Your fantasy team will thank you. It is not too late, but you guys know I'll be giving you guys a list of the running backs with the easiest fantasy playoff schedules and if we should be buying low on them now before it gets too close, or if we should pump the brakes and not trade for them, sell them high if we have them on our team. So make sure to stick around to the end of the video because it is packed with information we have to know and is really valuable for anybody. You guys know I hate to waste people's time in these videos, so let's jump right into it with the running back with the 10th easiest fantasy playoff schedule. Our first one here, Rhamondre Stevenson. Again, this is an assumption that your fantasy playoffs go through week 15, 16, and championship in the 17. That is what most run off of. If your league isn't set that way, I would suggest you do it because in week 18, a lot of teams tend to bench star players, and if they're not in playoff contention, they don't really try. And he gets the Chiefs, Broncos, and Bills through this 3-week stretch. Nothing but green over here. The Chiefs are in the middle of the pack for points allowed to the running back position. The Bills are top 15. But in week 16, in the middle of those two, he gets the Denver Broncos, who allow the most points to opposing running backs this season by a lot. They're the only team allowing 30 points to a total backfield this year. Now, Rhamondre Stevenson, I don't have him as the best back necessarily, but he is a decent buy candidate if you do want to get him on your squad. I am completely okay with it for these reasons. I wouldn't give the world for him, but he's definitely a guy we should be looking at. And the reason why he's a safer running back is because of his receiving upside. He is very utilized out of the backfield for targets, and the reason why this is important and gives him a higher floor is because in these matchups against the Bills and the Chiefs that aren't games where the Patriots are going to control the run game, he's still going to be involved if this game gets out of hand because he's going to get targets out of the backfield when they're trying to keep up with the pace of these good teams. He projects out to 3 or 4 receptions a game with 50 yards on the ground. That gives him a decently high floor, and he doesn't need the Patriots to be an amazing, crazy offense, which they have not been by any means, to be useful and productive in fantasy football. He's coming into his bye week now, and this is a great opportunity to buy him low because a lot of teams that are trying to fight for playoff spots don't want to wait through these bye weeks. But the running back with the 9th easiest fantasy playoff schedule, and one that I would suggest all of you guys to go through and send a trade offer for, we need to be buying low, essentially if you want to call it a buy low, is Jonathan Taylor. He gets the Steelers, Falcons, and Raiders in the fantasy championship, which is a team that gives up the 4th most points to opposing running backs every single week. We can buy him low when the time is right. And the Falcons matchup isn't necessarily a great one. They do allow the 25th most points to opposing running backs, but the other two make up for it because the Steelers allow the 8th most points, and again, the Raiders allow the 4th in the fantasy championship. He continues to expand his role. He's seeing a higher and higher and higher snap count every single week, topping his highest last week, and that's only going up. Again, he's very involved in the receiving game, which gives him a higher floor like Rhamondre Stevenson. If any of these games were to get out of hand, he'd still carry some kind of value because they'd be playing from behind and he'd be getting more passes out of the backfield, which is the main reason why I'm not really too worried about the Falcons matchup when we're looking at Jonathan Taylor. Receiving backs always get a boost in negative matchups compared to the ones that only get ground game work, and they don't get hit with a negative game script as hard as ones that don't. But it's all been good and smooth so far. All of these running backs have been relatively buy low or buy candidates in general that we need to be getting on our team, but the team with the 8th easiest fantasy schedule brings in some questions, and that is the Steelers with Jalen Warren and Najee Harris. They get the Colts with the 5th most points to opposing running backs, the Bengals with the 16th, and the Seahawks in the championship at the 12th most points allowed. But I'm sure you guys can already know where I'm going with this. I'd rather not have any of you guys have to deal with the headache of this backfield. It is a complete committee. They are taking value and usage from each other. If you have been around this page long enough, you know why I hate committee backfields, but it just severely lowers the floor and ceiling for these running backs. They have no path to upside if they're splitting carries with each other, and there's really not one running back you can get an edge with. I have them as my RB 30 and 31 for the rest of the season. Yes, Jalen Warren I guess will be more valuable because we drafted him with a lower pick. The only way I consider having one or both of these running backs is if you want the handcuff, because the reason I say Jalen Warren might be more valuable is because if Najee or Jalen Warren were to get injured, the other running back is becoming a top league winning guy. And again, the reason I don't want any of us to trade for these running backs is because I don't want a guy on our team that doesn't have his own control over his upside. Whatever either of these guys do talent-wise, they're never going to overtake the other and become a workhorse unless one gets injured, and I'm not banking our wins off injuries. Don't go out and trade for these guys unless the owner is giving them out for free for complete dirt cheap. Yes, they have a good fantasy playoff schedule, but it is going to be risky starting them every week. You're going to be hoping for an injury again. If you think that's going to happen, you can make the move, but either way, they're going to be riding the bench until a good matchup comes up. Going down to the backfield with the 7th easiest fantasy schedule for the playoffs is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs, and this is one that I'm very excited about. They get the Patriots that give up the 14th most points to opposing running backs, then the Raiders at 4 again, and then we get the Bengals at 16. All positive matchups and green here. But again, the reason we need to be getting this guy, which is different from the people we've been talking about so far, is because his offense offense is so elite. And because of that, it really doesn't matter if his matchups are good or bad. Pacheco is a guy that's actually been increasing his usage in the pass game, surprisingly enough. If we look at last year, Jerick McKinnon was the sole receiving back. But then this year, in the last 2 games, he's running 54% of the routes out of the backfield, topping Jerick McKinnon. He's been increasing his usage and his efficiency throughout the entirety of his career. He's already been a very efficient running back since his rookie year. He is a top 20 running back for the rest of the season in my eyes. His schedule from now on is good, as well as the playoff schedule. And you can get him for pretty good RB2 value right now. He gets utilized at the goal line. He gets utilized in the 3rd down, 2-minute drill, everything. And this is all great news when you have one of the best offenses in the NFL, because you're going to stay on the field, you're going to get red zone opportunities, and you're going to get overall inflated offensive numbers that is normal for him. So go ahead and send a trade offer, see what the manager is asking for him, and if you have him on your team, go ahead and keep him, stash him for these playoffs, because he has a great schedule. But speaking of great schedules, moving into the 6th spot with the easiest fantasy playoff schedule is Josh Jacobs and the Raiders. He gets the Chargers in week 15, giving up the 13th most points to opposing running backs, and the Chiefs at 20, and then in the fantasy championship, he gets the Colts, giving up the 5th most. And this is again a guy I would be going through and sending trade offers where we can, because he is the workhorse guy. He gets involved in the receiving game a lot, rushing game, obviously, goal line, 3rd downs, everything. He is the RB1. I know there was some shakiness in the beginning of the season. He started out a bit slow, but with Aiden O'Connell, he has been a better, way better running back, top 3 in every single one of those weeks in usage. And again, he's a guy that even if the offense isn't the best and doesn't operate very efficiently, he's not going to take that much of a hit, and he's still a guy we can be starting week in and week out. But he is going to be a bit harder to trade for, because it does depend on how your league mates value him. In some leagues, I know people are valuing him as a top 5 running back, and in others, he's outside the top 10. So go see what his value is. Again, he doesn't need this offense to be great to be a fantasy viable guy. He's averaging 4 or 5 targets out of the backfield, 60 to 70 rushing yards a game, and he's not splitting the backfield. So there isn't much we have to worry about, not much risk. So go ahead and send a trade offer, see what you can get. But moving into the top 5, this is where things get very, very interesting and where the fantasy playoff schedules start to separate. Derrick Henry is the running back with the 5th easiest schedule this season. He gets matched up against the Texans twice, who give up the 9th most points to opposing running backs, and then the Seahawks in the middle at 12. And I'm sure when I say that, a lot of you guys are getting flashbacks from last year when Derrick Henry was averaging 200 rushing yards a game on the Texans. Is that level of dominance going to continue? Probably not. He's not the same running back. He's not utilized the same way in this offense, but that doesn't mean these aren't great matchups. Will Levis has brought some light into this offense. In the 3 weeks that he has been the starter for this team, he has elevated the passing and the rushing game in efficiency by a lot. But this is a guy that is just outside the top 10 running backs in rest of season value, at least where I have him at. So he doesn't have the highest value, so it might be pretty easy to trade for him. But again, it's not going to be anything like it was in the beginning of the season where people were trading absolute dirt for him. He's still splitting usage with Tajay Spears. Am I worried about him in these fantasy playoff matchups? Not necessarily. Derrick Henry is still going to get his, but with the time on field he does get, he gets a very high usage in that number, and he's also still very efficient. He's going to continue getting around his 20 touches a game, which is great when the Titans are going to be controlling these games in the fantasy playoffs. That just leans to a more run-heavy game script, which is very good for Derrick Henry because he has been dominating in positive game scripts this year, and when they're in losing game scripts, it kind of hurts him a lot. We don't have to worry about that here in the fantasy playoffs. Again, go see what you can get for him in your league, but you can pop any kind of comments for trade ideas in this video, and I'll go ahead and answer them like I always do. But moving into the backfield with the 4th easiest fantasy playoff schedule is going to be the Browns. They get the Jets at 10, Texans at 9, and Bears at 8 for the most fantasy points given to running backs, all top 10 matchups. You might look at this Jets matchup and say, wait, I thought they were a good defense. Why are they still a top 10 in running backs? That is because their pass defense is one you do not want to be touching, but their run defense really isn't that scary. But when it comes to Kareem Hunt and Jerome Ford, these are my RB 29 and 35. I'm not necessarily super excited about them. Again, we get a committee backfield approach where it's split 60-40 in Jerome Ford's favor, so I wouldn't really necessarily advise you guys to go trade for them. If you want one of them, you can get Ford. I'd only really do it if you can give up some bench pieces you never really use. But Hunt has continued to eat into Jerome Ford's work throughout the entirety of the season, and Ford isn't really that efficient of a running back on his own. He does get some work in the receiving game next to Hunt, so it's not all bad, but these aren't guys I'm rushing to trade for just because they have top 10 matchups in every single one of their fantasy playoff games. But the top 3 in fantasy playoff schedules is where things get very interesting and where we need to dissect these teams. If you guys can take a guess on who the number 3 is, unfortunately, as a Commanders fan, it is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. They get matchups against the Seahawks, who again rank 12th, and then the Giants, who rank 7th, but they have been declining fast in the rankings, and then the Cardinals, who are top 3 in points given up to the running back position. These are all positives for Dandre Swift, who is a guy that's probably going to be one of the hardest running backs to trade for because I know a lot of people that have way inflated value for him. Yes, he's a great running back, but everybody has him inside their top 5 and even higher in that. I probably wouldn't go that high. He's still in the top 10 for me, but it depends what everybody has his value at, because if they're valuing him as a top 4 running back, it's going to be hard to get him. But he's averaging a very solid usage rate, around 16 carries a game, 4 receptions out of the backfield, which to me is surprising because the Eagles were bottom 3 in targets out of the backfield to running backs last year, but now it doesn't matter anymore. They got Dandre Swift. And because of that, he has a really safe floor with his receiving upside, and he has a huge ceiling because of how good this Eagles offense is. With the Eagles, you're going to have a whole bunch of opportunities like the Chiefs in the red zone, time on field, anything you can think of. They're going to be on the field scoring points and getting offensive snaps. So go see what your league mates value Dandre Swift as, send a trade offer, do what you got to do, but don't overpay. But the running back with the second easiest fantasy football schedule is going to be Austin Ekeler for the playoffs, and I guess Josh Kelly if you want to count that too. He gets the Raiders at 4, and then the Bills again towards the middle of the pack, but then he also gets the Broncos in the championship, which allow the most points to fantasy running backs. And there really isn't much you have to say about Austin Ekeler. He was the RB2 in the draft coming into the year. He's the RB2 right now. And yeah, he might only get 70% of the snaps on the field, but he still gets his 14-15 carries a game and a world of receiving upside. I mean, he's second on the team in targets behind Keenan Allen. He has missed some time with injury this year, which makes the data a little bit less, but it's Austin Ekeler. We don't need the data. He's been doing this for years. He's going to be consistent week in and week out. It doesn't really matter what the matchup is, especially when you're on an offense like the Chargers, again, like the Eagles, like the Chiefs, super high power, time on field, red zone opportunities, all that good stuff. He's averaging 17 fantasy points a game on an offense that will move the ball. When we get into the fantasy playoffs and these great matchups, it's going to go up to more like 20, 21 fantasy points. But any given Sunday in those matchups, he has the opportunity to drop 40 and win you a week. So go get him on your team if you can. His value isn't as high as it should be with the time he's missed this year. But the running back with the easiest fantasy playoff schedule, and this is probably the most controversial part of the video, is it a trap? Is it worth it? Who knows? It is Bijan Robinson. He gets the Panthers that allow the second most points to opposing running backs, then the Colts that allow the 5th, and then the Bears who allow the 8th most points to opposing running backs this year. This is a great schedule, all almost top 5. Again, far and away the best schedule by far, but the team circumstances is what is holding me back here. Arthur Smith is public enemy number 1 for any fantasy football player, which is you watching this video. He just has not used Bijan enough. He's staying around a 70% snap share. He's only getting 10 carries a game and some usage in the receiving game, but all of these numbers are down from the beginning of the season. He started out really hot, and he's kind of been on the decline, which is bringing some risk. In my mind, in my analysis, he's still a top 10 running back for the rest of the season. Is he towards the bottom of that list? Yes, but he's still a running back that's going to get you 3 to 4 targets out of the backfield, 50 yards on the ground, regardless of how much they don't want to use him. He's very efficient. I think now is a good time to go trade for him. He's coming into his bye week this week. Managers could be annoyed with him, but his value is definitely lower than it was in the beginning of the season. He was drafted as a top 5 running back. He will be one of the more risky running backs moving forward, as we've seen recently, but he's still a guy that I would consider trading for, as long as you don't have to give up your best piece to get him. If you can pull off a 2-for-1 in really any capacity, I'm cool with it, but I just would not give my number 1 wide receiver, running back, quarterback, whatever to get him on my team. Hopefully these good matchups in the fantasy playoffs are going to catapult him into more usage over Tyler Algier and just in general more field time. Now is a good time to take that risk and buy in on him now. That is going to finish off this video of all of the running backs with the top fantasy playoff schedules. If you guys did enjoy this video, let me know in the comments. Should I drop one for the hardest playoff schedule? Should I do wide receivers? Let me know. Whatever you guys want to do, I will make a video on. But I appreciate you guys hanging out in this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one coming tomorrow.